Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to this month's webinar, Popping the Question and Securing Donor Commitment. My name is Christine Kim. I am the project coordinator for Fundraising Academy, and I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, a couple of notes. This webinar will be conversational with the opportunity to ask questions during, as well as a 30-minute Q&A following the presentation. Please feel free to submit any questions you have in the Q&A option within your Zoom controls. Closed captioning is also available for this webinar. To enable the setting, click the CC option in your Zoom controls. Caption size can also be adjusted under video settings under accessibility. In the days following the webinar, you will receive an email with a link to access the slide deck and a recording to review again at your leisure. You've got a cause, learn how to fund it. At Fundraising Academy, Cause Selling Education, we enhance fundraisers' skills so they can develop and sustain donor relationships to advance their cause in today's growing giving landscape through a proven contemporary curriculum presented by world-class nonprofit fundraising leaders. We also want to take some time to recognize our important affiliate partners who provide training and education to fundraisers nationally. Check out the map to find an institute in your community. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce today's presenter, Laura Rice. Laura leads the development of sustaining philanthropy to support the San Diego Zoo Safari Park, and San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance commitment to worldwide conservation efforts. She built her expertise in fundraising and development with over 20 years in the sector and excels at devising creative and strategic solutions and building relationships and teams. She is skilled in organizing people, information, and programs for meaningful impact. Having earned her MBA from Point Loma Nazarene University and a BA in communication from UCSD, Laura brings with her an extensive career working in fundraising, major gifts, and stewardship, including her most recent employer, National University, where she was a senior director of development. She has also served in development leadership roles at Girl Scouts of San Diego, the American Red Cross, and UCSD School of Medicine. She is currently involved with multiple community organizations, including serving as the president of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, AFP, San Diego chapter, and is a graduate of LEAD Impact 2020. Welcome, Laura, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Christine. What a lovely introduction. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to be going over learning how to uncover hidden questions and concerns, discovering ways to overcome objections, review ways to close, and learn how to deal with rejection. But before we get started, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Please share in the chat how many years of fundraising experience you have.
We also have a poll launching on your screen, so feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat and answer the poll. Looks like we got some answers coming in. Okay, and I will close this poll right now and share the results. If I can, there you go. So here are the results. Laura, are you able to see these?
I am, thank you. So it looks like we've got about half of newer fundraisers. Welcome, so glad you're here. About 20% with 4 to 10 years experience and a similar amount with over 10 years experience. So that's great. I can't wait for all of you to share some of your stories. As Christine mentioned, this is really conversational. So please pipe up. There's different methods. And then it looks like we also have a volunteer or a board member here. Thank you for your service and for your dedication. Christine, do you want to share the best ways to share questions?
Yes. So again, thank you everyone who's introducing yourselves in the chat. Please continue to do so. And if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to add that into the Q&A. But we will have, just like Laura mentioned, a lot of opportunity for you to interact and share your stories.
Thank you. So today we're going to talk about the cause selling cycle. You've probably seen different donor cycles in your experience. This is the cause selling cycle, which is a bit more specific than some of the ones you've seen before. Today's webinar is going to focus on number 6 and number 7, handling objections and the ask. So we will start with what are objections? Please share some of the common objections you encounter in the chat. An objection is very different than a rejection. And so in this segment, we'll talk about donor objections and how it's often actually a sign of interest. You'll learn how to identify the various types of objections you may encounter, and we'll cover the best ways to overcome them. When you view objections with the right attitude, they become very valuable and may help guide you toward a successful ask. They will even leave with a tool for overcoming resistance. Christine, were there any people sharing their objections they've encountered?
We have a couple people typing. I know everybody else is typing. We have a really wide range of people who are here. But let's see. Some of them say many object to the price or the amount that they're asking for. Or a very common one is, I already have a nonprofit that I donate to. I can't support you all now, but maybe in my next year's budget. That's very common.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it sounds like that second, or the last one there is likely not from an individual as much as maybe a corporation or a foundation. But yeah, with those, especially getting in the cycle as early as you can, and then it very well might not be this year. We've certainly seen with COVID, individuals and organizations have really had to change what their budgets look like and what their support in the community looks like. So we'll get into some of this. These are great examples, folks. Thank you. One thing to really think about is that objections aren't a battle. It's an indication of interest. If they wouldn't have questions, if they weren't curious about learning more. And if it wasn't for objections, fundraisers would be out of a job. Every single direct mail piece and every ask would always have a yes. So if it was really clear to your donor why they should give to your cause, there wouldn't need to be us helping manage those relationships. So as we move into this discussion of how to handle objections from your soon-to-be donors, think about them from a positive perspective. The problem with the word objection is that it brings some sort of clash between a fundraiser and a prospect, in which case someone wins and someone loses. But what people fail to understand is that hearing the word no and hearing an objection are not the same thing. I like to say it's not no until it's heck no. Usually no means not right now, or not quite that way, or, oh, that wasn't quite what I had in mind. So when you think about objections from that perspective, you realize that they reveal your donor's interest and can indicate their true feelings. Donors object when you haven't answered all their questions yet. And some objections are nothing more than stalls. So if prospects haven't been properly qualified, an objection is actually a sign they're in the process of eliminating any remaining personal concerns and moving closer to saying yes and making a gift. In fact, an objection can later become leverage for asking for the gift. This is because offering an objection is another way for prospects to say, here are my conditions for giving, or I want to give as soon as you answer a few more questions and reassure me that this is the right thing to do. Objections become much easier to manage if you view them as your donors are asking you to help them figure out how to make the gift. For instance, if a potential donor objects by saying, I'd love to give, but we're sending 2 kids to Ivy League schools right now, and so we just don't have the extra income, you could pack up and leave. Or you can brainstorm with the prospect about ways to make the gift that would also fit the need to pay their children's tuition. With this example, you could really think about timing. Maybe this could become a multi-year pledge, or even a pledge with quarterly payments over the years. When you offer these kinds of suggestions, you go from being someone asking for something to becoming an advisor for them, all because the prospect offered an objection. There's 4 main types of objections. And so, you want to consider what type of objection your donor is providing. The stall or put off, the not right now, usually their words aren't a full representation of their real feelings or their underlying reasons for hesitating. Sometimes they might say something like, I really don't want to think about your cause right now, because then I'd have to make a decision, and I'm not sure how I want to do that yet. But few donors are ever going to say that to you that clearly. A stall might indicate you've not answered a question or haven't finished all of your research and qualification. And a stall is less likely to rob you of your confidence and momentum when you can build on that sense of rapport you're establishing with the prospect. So if you hear a stall, ask a relevant question and care about the response. You're more likely to gain a supporter if you ask questions, uncover genuine concerns, and focus on the relationship rather than the gift. So tell me more about that, or, oh, what makes you say that? Gives you the chance to unearth the real reason behind what's going on. The searcher is a hidden request for additional information. There will be times when a prospects object simply to get more information, even though they've already mentally decided they want to support you. Some donors just want to be convinced that giving to your organization is the right thing to do. So they might ask a question, or they might state it as a statement, something like, well, your organization is doing this and that and the other, and I'm not sure about that. They're really saying, please tell me more about this thing that I bring up because I want to understand it better. The next type is the hidden objection. This kind of resistance can be difficult to identify and overcome. Sometimes there can be hidden problems or unspoken hesitations, which can delay or prevent a gift. Prospects give hidden objections when they're unwilling to let you know their real concern. Many times the reason is personal. Maybe they're in the middle of a divorce or something's going on with their family members, and they don't think about that with relationship to your organization and the partnership you're building. And they might prefer not to reveal these. So you may realize that your prospect has hidden objections when their answers fail to make sense, given what you've already discussed. This means there's something else in the background that they haven't shared with you yet, and it may not be directly related to you or the organization. The best course of action for this is to treat it like the searcher objection. Ask a few more questions, attempt to close again, see if the objection remains. Some hidden objections become stopper objections, which is our last category. Prospects often have legitimate reasons for why they're unable to give. The stopper is an objection to which no satisfactory solution can be found. Not every prospect will become an advocate of your organization. This is inevitable. And if you encounter such a situation, simply recognize this. Thank the prospect for their time and move on to a more qualified prospect with a real heart for your cause and the ability to give. We know that fundraising is a numbers game. If only 1 out of every 3 or 4 asks is going to be a yes, that means you're going to have 2 or 3 no's before you get there. And that's okay. It all just gets you closer to partnering with the right people who want to work with your organization. So there's good techniques for negotiating objections. One of my favorites is the very first one, which you might have heard of before: feel, felt, found. And this is a technique that is common in sales conversations as well. So depending on your donor's background, they may be familiar with it and recognize it. But this idea is when somebody has a stall or a really personal concern, it can offset hostility, placate an unhappy donor, or inform someone who does not yet clearly understand the value of the organization. So you want to answer this kind of objection with, I can understand how you feel. I had other donors who felt the same way until they found out ... And so an example for this one, with the Red Cross, evidently back during World War II, there were issues with our partnership with the British government, where the Red Cross wasn't allowed to provide free coffee to soldiers. And so I cannot tell you how many donors in the 2000s would say to me, well, I don't know if I can support the Red Cross. You made soldiers pay for coffee. The fact that happened 60 years prior was not relevant to them. And so I could share, I can understand how you feel. I felt the same way and had other donors who felt that way as well, until they found out that it was actually our partnership with the British government that required that. But could I take you out to coffee and make it up to you? And some said yes and some said no, but we were able to give them the information they needed in order to overcome that objection. This approach serves several purposes. It shows you understand their concerns, and it reassures them that having this objection is not unusual. With your own organizations, you're going to find the common questions, and you're going to be able to ask why or explain to them why the objection isn't true. That's denying the objection later on this list. I'm not going to get into details on every single one of these with our time limit today, but leading with curiosity is a really great way. Always lean into wonder. Ask why. Ask them to help you understand their perspective. You're going to get the slides from this presentation, so I'm not going to go into every detail here either. But there's this 6-step plan for handling objections. As we've already talked about, we've redefined objections as signs of interest. We've talked about the categories of objections. We've addressed timing considerations for handling objections. And then here's your 6 techniques. And so you're going to want to read through this information and think about donors you've worked with and what types of objections they've had and how you've been able to answer, or where the challenge might be. It's always okay to say, you know, that's a great point. Let me find out and get back to you. No one expects you to know everything, and being able to have that inquisitive curiosity yourself allows you to continue the conversation. So we're going to put all these pieces together now on our next step of moving towards making the ask. Before we get into that though, I wanted to ask Christine, are there other questions or other pieces you'd like me to go over before we move on?
Awesome. It doesn't look like we have a lot of questions, but we have a lot of agreements of how of facing objections. We say, let's see, I want to read a couple of these. My feeling is that I am encountering objections and I have not done enough research to know that they are interested in the particular organization I am championing, which is very true. Or other thing was, oh, my scrolling is being so funny right now. Rejection to me means not enough value has been provided. So again, a lot of what you mentioned, Laura, of just sharing more about what they need to hear or figuring out what they are wondering and needing to hear as well. And yes, just to reiterate what Laura is saying, this is recorded, so don't worry, everyone. If you're furiously writing notes, you will get the slide deck and the recording after this.
Thanks, Christine. Yeah, fundraisers need a specific plan to handle donor resistance. It's a big part of our job. And so it allows us to help steer the ship of our relationship conversation. Having a plan helps ensure we don't allow our prospect to derail us with every question or comment. And then, because then you lose the ability to direct the conversation. When this happens, your perceived value decreases, and so do your chances of successfully making the ask. You should never engage in a power struggle with donors. Rather, you should have a plan in place for handling objections in the most systematic way possible. You're having a conversation, and we've all encountered donors, I bet, who come into the room storming on something that maybe doesn't have anything to do with your organization. So trying to bring them back to how they want to make a difference and how your organization helps fit that goal of theirs is a critical piece. And that will help you to have a strategy in place. It gives you confidence. Having a plan enables you to welcome objections instead of shuddering at the thought that someone might not see eye to eye with you on every last issue. So I'll go through this a little bit. We have a little bit more time than I realized. So let me go through these 6 steps. The first piece is about listening and hearing them out. That it's because we're experts on our organization, it can be so easy for us to become an encyclopedia who just wants to say, oh, and did you know about this? And also this, and here's this other thing. But really, we need to listen, and we know that. But fundraisers are typically extroverts and want to engage in these conversations. But it's so important not to interrupt donors who are expressing their opinion. We want to listen carefully to what they say. You want to observe their verbal and their nonverbal behavior and listen to what they're not saying as well. If you really listen, then you'll be able to pinpoint the source of the objection. That will allow you to better explain the ways your organization can serve your donors' needs and be of value to them in the long term. The second step is to confirm your understanding. This is critical. Often we're not looking at the world in the same way. And if we don't confirm what we thought we heard, we might well answer a question that wasn't actually what was being asked. So you want to use your own words and repeat what the prospect was trying to clarify and classify the real objection so that you can show that you understand. In addition, give yourself time to formulate an answer. Restating the objection in a sympathetic manner dissolves defensiveness and helps you avoid the temptation to argue and gives your mind a second to figure out what you actually want to say. So as you're saying, as I understand it, you feel, and then explain their position in your own words, Once you've proven you understand, then they'll be ready to listen to you. Your purpose in this phase is to evaluate and isolate the concern. Determine whether their justification for not giving is the real reason or a statement of hiding the actual objection. You may decide to answer immediately, postpone, or seek more information. If you need more information before you can answer, ask questions until you know what information you're going to need. It may help to ask prospects to explain their objection further. At times, people may not know fully what they're objecting to. Explaining it will help clarify the issue for both you and them. Step 3 is to acknowledge their point of view. Once you've confirmed your understanding, take responsibility for any misinterpretation. Sometimes you might say, oh, I must not have stated that clearly, and I apologize. And then you can restate what you were going to say. If the prospect indicates that they had a bad experience with your organization or your predecessor, believe it. Say you're sorry. Find a way to cushion your response so that you can explain to them that you're on their side and want to help them have a strong relationship with your organization. Step 4 is selecting a specific technique. You have to decide quickly on the technique you're going to use and avoid showing that the objection has upset you or derailed you in any way. Keep in mind that there's many variables, and so you can't guarantee that every objection will be answered to the satisfaction of the prospect. But then you want to go ahead and answer the objection. Negotiation is persuasion, not manipulation. So avoid explanations that cloud the issue or cause people to feel that you're avoiding the question. Oops, I'm sorry. I went way too far. And then the last thing you're going to do is attempt to close. And there's a lot of great things that you want to think about with this. And we'll get into that more in a moment with making the ask. Closing opportunities, though, exist at various times throughout the entire negotiation practice. One of my favorite things to do is attempt a trial close. A trial close gets the prospect's reaction without exerting any pressure about making a definite decision. It can be used at any point during your presentation to test the waters and see whether you've presented enough information for the prospect to make a decision yet. They might start with, if you were to give to this project, or in your opinion, would, or how do you feel about this? After you successfully answer an objection at the end of your presentation, or after an unsuccessful attempt to close, you can go for that ask again. The worst thing that can happen is the other person will say no or offer another objection. If that happens, try to identify the reasons and any other remaining challenges to make sure you can get to a successful ask at a later date. Finish your presentation by recapping what you heard from the prospect and ask if you can update them on your organization's progress in the future. All right, next we're going to move into actually making the ask. So we get started in 1 to 3 words. How do you feel about making the ask? Share this in the chat. Many fundraisers dread the ask, so if that's the way you're feeling, you're not alone. Asking for a gift, though, is just the natural conclusion to your successful interview and conversation with your donor. In this segment, we'll talk about facing the close with confidence and talk about the proper attitude about closing, signals that reveal a prospect's readiness to give, and specific techniques to use during the ask. The only way to receive more gifts is to ask for more gifts, and that's why we're here. Christine, any responses on how folks are feeling about the ask?
Yes, so we have a couple people are saying they don't like the ask, but they've been getting a lot better at it. Let's see, says that they're very nervous. Someone said the ask, not my strong suit. Another concerned that I haven't gotten to the point where an ask is fair and reasonable. That is very true. A lot other people are saying nervous. Some people say nervously excited, anxious, and some people love the ask as well. They say that that's their favorite part of the conversation.
That's wonderful. I love this broad range we have. And I'm sure it changes depending on your prospect, right? If you've got a great long-term relationship with a donor, it's a much easier thing to move forward than when it's somebody new and maybe you haven't really built that relationship yet, or they've got some back history with your organization that makes things more complicated. So we'll get into ways to build that confidence for yourself. First is to have a closing consciousness. This is the most important factor. It's your attitude. You're going to be always closing. Many fundraisers have adopted a distorted view of the ask, so they dread it, even though the ask is the primary reason we're there. If you felt that way, though, you're not alone. And you certainly know you're not alone, even in this conversation with the responses we've gotten. Closing is not a separate event tacked onto the end of a donor meeting. It's something that happens all along. Asking is part of your relationship with a donor. They know why you're there. Much like marriage proposals, you remember that this is called popping the question. You should know the answer before you make the ask. Closing begins with your prospect the moment you speak the first word to them and continues through the whole process until the gift has been received. You close on many points: the prospect's agreement to meet with you in the first place, confirming the existence of the need, and the acceptance of the explanation of your organization's benefits and the way they're addressing that need. A gift has been received or lost long before the time arrives to ask for it. The final step is really just a formality, a necessary step, but not one that requires your donors to make weighty decisions. Ultimately, it's a simple concept. You must be able to gain commitment from the beginning. Don't confuse this with the concept of a hard sell. A cutthroat approach will alienate potential donors. Instead, explain your agenda. Tell them exactly what you're asking for, how it can benefit them and others. Being upfront about your intentions promotes an honest, mutually respectful, and rewarding discussion, paving the way for a smooth close. When you get agreement all throughout the fundraising process, the final step should be the easiest one. So we want to be assumptive. So you're going to assume that they want to be part of your organization. You want to use language that demonstrates that partnership from the beginning. Things like when you become a supporter or because of your past support. It's important to avoid words like if and should because they're conditional and help folks to see opportunities to block instead of automatically becoming part of the conversation. It's something like when you say, when can we meet? Or can we meet on Tuesday or Wednesday? Different strategies. And when you say Tuesday or Wednesday, it's a lot harder for them to say, no, I don't want to meet at all. So you want to assume that they want to meet with you and that they want to be part of what your organization is doing. This establishes a positive environment in which the prospect can more easily say yes. This strategy works well with indecisive donors who tend to be nervous about making a big decision. Present them with minor decisions along the way that give them the opportunity to confirm agreement on minor points along the way. So maybe you say, I'd like to ask you a few questions that help me understand your particular needs. Would that be okay with you? Yes. Then continue. Do you like this idea for our new program? Yes. During the closing part, you might ask, do you believe we'll reach our intended goals for this project? Yes. Does the budget we have made for this project make sense to you? Yes. Then it seems we can go ahead with our discussion of the most appropriate gift amount. Yes. These are also questions that allow you to unearth objections. If they have a challenge with the budget or with the project or something else, it'll come up as you ask these questions. These are all close-ended questions, so you have to be confident you'll receive a positive response before you ask them. When you make the final ask, the prospect is inclined to keep on agreeing, and then that will mean that you and your organization have a gift. You want to provide a summary of benefits. One of the best closing tactics is to summarize the major points made during the presentation right before the ask. Review the features and benefits of the offering with emphasis on the points that generated the most interest. This method is especially good for prospects who need to explain their decision to someone else, such as a spouse or other influencer. You review the benefits and ask the prospect to confirm that these are important to them. Avoid mentioning anything new at this point. Only bring up an additional note if the summary fails and you need to answer another question. You want to concentrate on summarizing those items that the prospect seemed most interested in and how it connected directly to their motivation for giving. This is where your detective work comes in. How do they want to change the world? Your organization is doing great things and has this need that this donor can fulfill. Help them do that. So you could begin your summary by saying, let's review the major points that really resonated with you. From there, you can list the key points and wait for your donor to confirm each one before moving on to the next. This summary puts the most compelling highlights of your organization's story into a capsule form. It gives both you and your prospect an opportunity to reconsider what was covered throughout your conversation. Once agreement has been expressed, the prospect is in a positive frame of mind, and the time is right to start to get some sort of formal commitment. Your summary then has to be combined with a direct ask. With all these major benefits available, you can see that aligning yourself with our organization is the right choice. That's why we're asking for a gift of $50,000 today to benefit the Sure Start program. You want to directly ask for a specific amount. You want to just come straight out. Now, you'll note that this ask was stated as a statement. That's again, that assumptive behavior. You could also ask it as a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Apologies. I'm going the wrong way. I'm sorry. Oh, technology. Here we are. Apologies for that. So you want to ask for a specific amount and you want to make sure that you're asking directly. And as I stated, that can be in a statement or it can be in a question. But you want to make sure that you've covered all the necessary features and benefits before you get to this point. And then you can say something like, now, only you know exactly how much you should really give to this project, Bill. But for a program like this, we'd like you to consider a leadership gift of at least $1 million. Remove all the I statements. You want to say we. You want to avoid the word don't. You don't want to say, why don't we discuss the amount? Why don't we determine how much good your gift will accomplish? This is an open invitation to provide an objection for your donor. Insertion of a negative into the close may implant doubt where none existed, and the prospect may try to tell you why not. So use a positive statement instead. Based on all these exciting developments, we're now ready to begin with you as our partner and would love you to consider a gift of $200,000. Or with the impact that's been made and the benefits we've discussed, you can see that aligning yourself with our organization is the right choice. That's why we're asking for $100,000 today. And then you need to be quiet. That number 5, that remain silent, is the most critical thing. So of all these pieces, this is the most important part. I have a little bit of a story here. The ask should always be followed with your silence. And if you are working with another fundraiser or a volunteer, you will have to make sure they know to be silent as well. I years ago was working with the representative of my organization in another community. And she wasn't a fundraiser, but she's the person who knew the prospect we were going to go meet with, who worked for a bank. So we were meeting with the vice president of this bank. And before we met with her, I talked with my colleague and I said, okay, here's our practice. We went through it and then I'll ask and then we'll be quiet and listen. And she said, okay, I get it. We'll be quiet. It evidently didn't sink in. That awkward silence can be challenging for folks who don't have experience. But there's also the saying that the person to talk after the quiet is the one who loses. So we go in, we have this great conversation with this bank manager or bank VP, and my colleague shares all these great community things, and I share a bit about the project. And then I say, and that's why today we hope that you'll consider a gift of $25,000. And then my colleague said, or if you wanted, you could purchase these $5 tchotchkes our organization also has for each of your employees. What do you think the prospect did? They bought 100 of these lovely $5 tchotchkes and spent $500 when we had just asked for $25,000. It was heartbreaking and definitely a challenge for me. But the most important thing in this example is that because my colleague quickly filled the silence, we didn't get to hear any question, hesitation, or concern that the prospect might have had, which could have been addressed. And so it was a learning lesson for me and for her. We didn't do many asks together after that experience, but I hope that she's doing well. The last piece on this is if your donor is hesitating, you want to stress the urgency of the need, but don't be desperate. You could say something like, the best time to give is when it's needed most. And given what we've discussed, I'd say that time's now. Wouldn't you? Be cautious and intentional with your communications around urgency. Your timelines should be something like, with your help today, we can get started by December, or something like that that's reasonable and realistic. Donors do not care about the urgency of your fiscal year end or your weekly or monthly metrics. I've seen so many direct mail pieces that's like the deadline's June 30th, but they don't tell you why June 30th matters. My guess is they're in the July to June fiscal year and they're trying to close out. If instead they said, with your gift by June 30th, 500 kids can go to camp or whatever it is, that would change the urgency to something that's meaningful for them. So you want to make sure that your urgency is about the people that you're serving, the cause that you're representing, not about anything internal or your arbitrary deadlines within your team. There's a number of reasons for failure to close. Does anybody want to share, based on your own experiences, what happens if you don't adequately research and qualify your prospect? What has happened for you? I'll give you guys a minute to share that as I go over a few more points. But what has happened when you didn't have that experience and hadn't done all your research? I'll give you a moment for that. But failure to close may result from a donor who's unwilling to give or simply isn't the right fit for your organization. If you haven't finished all those steps, you can get into some awkward conversations and your presentations might focus on the wrong thing, or you might supply uncompelling or uninspiring evidence that doesn't do much for them. So do we have some responses, Christine?
Yes, we do. We also had a great tip about your silence. Someone said, have a cup of water to sip on during the silent moment, so you're not tempted to talk. I think that's a great tip. So thank you
And then
for
you're
sharing
not just staring at the person like this. I like that a lot.
that. Yes. Okay, we have someone shared, research is my business model. My challenge is that the foundation of my entire program is based on research, development, and testing media. And the funders seem to think I should have the answers, which I do not have, but we would not have a huge disparity problems if she had those answers. So that's very hard. I can understand that when you don't know all of that. Let's see. Someone also just had a question of, is there a benefit to bringing with you to a meeting someone who has made a significant contribution? Wait, let me reread that. Is there a benefit to bringing with you to a meeting such as this someone who has already made a significant contribution?
Absolutely. Anytime you can engage with other donors or volunteers supporting the cause, it's going to be more effective than with you as the paid staff person being the one to have that conversation. You want to be able to be the one to do the ask. Usually volunteers and donors aren't super comfortable with that. If they are, bless. Have a great time. But in general, that's the part that folks are concerned about and why they don't want to be part of an ask. But if it's, I bring Christine with me because she's already made her $50,000 contribution to this really important project. And I wanted to have her share about why it mattered to her, especially if it's peer-to-peer. If she's friends with this prospect, or if she's just a member of our community who's respected, having that person come and share that information can be really helpful. Again, they know why we're there, but when we're able to bring a subject matter expert with us in the area or bring a fellow donor, that really helps change the perspective of the conversation. Were there any other questions in there, Christine, or should I keep going?
Well, we had one other tip of advice that I think is really great, so I wanted to share out here is, my PhD professor would tell me that the answer to an unasked question is always no. If you ask, you at least have a 50-50 shot at a yes. I think that's really sweet.
I love that. I mean, all development is asking. It's asking people if they want to get involved and in what way and how they want to help change the world. And so I love that. I'm a firm believer in, when you ask, I mean, you already have a no. Once you ask, you might get a yes. Without that, you can't ever move forward. So on that inadequate prospecting and qualification, I had a donor once who I had done the good work, and I just couldn't figure out why she was hesitant about the gift. And I talked with my supervisor at the time, and she said, ask, what would I have to do to help you make this gift? And so I did. I said, what would I have to do to help this happen? And she laughed and said, you'd have to buy my house. My house is on the market and it's just the only thing. I don't have any finances until that comes through. And no amount of prospecting or qualification was going to show me that. So instead, I was able to talk with her about, well, would she be interested once she had sold her home, etc. And then we could address it. But again, that wasn't something internal to my organization in the least. It was something going on in her life that I hadn't noticed yet. So when there's missteps in the cost selling cycle, a prospect's failure to give doesn't automatically mean that you're a poor closer. Those rejections should prompt you to study your performance and find out where your insufficient research occurred. You can't focus only on closing as a fundraising skill. It'd be like expecting that Serena Williams, the tennis wonder, say that the last shot of the match is all that matters. Of course, the final shot that wins a championship is the most obvious success moment. But when you're already winning, the last shot is simply the inevitable conclusion. When you achieve agreement throughout the fundraising process, the final step is the easiest one. And so the timing piece and the need discovery components are when you haven't done those sufficiently is when you're going to have challenges with closing. So there's signals that you want to watch for along the way. The chef technique is one. Well, actually, let me start. What donor readiness signals do you look for, especially with the virtual landscape that we've been in lately? If you've been doing Zoom asks and Zoom meetings, what types of things are you looking for with your donors to know that you're getting closer to the ask? I know for me, one of the pieces is their engagement in the first place. If I'm talking to a donor who's staring at their phone and they're, oh, somebody's coming in and everything else, I obviously don't have their attention and maybe we need to reschedule for another time. Or maybe this isn't their priority the way that I think it is. So being able to ask about the distraction that you see on a Zoom meeting can be really helpful. And if it's not a good time, maybe we can reschedule for another that would be better. Or now maybe you can even meet in person. It'll depend on the donor's willingness and how they're feeling and your own COVID boosters and all of that. But I think the more we can get back in person, the more fun our work is. Nothing replaces face-to-face interaction, even though we've tried really hard to do our best, right? So what types of things have you all been looking for as you're having these conversations, especially over the last 2 years?
As people are typing those up, we did have a couple questions in the chat that I wanted to get to. This one was a really interesting question is, what if you get a no to a financial ask? Is it sometimes useful to pivot to a discussion about non-monetary ways they could contribute? And how would you go about this?
Absolutely. If you get a no to the monetary, you want to know the why behind it. Maybe you asked for 50,000 and they could really give 25. Great. But if 25,000 won't actually make the project move forward and you had a minimum or something like that, then, you could say, it's really too bad that you can't engage in this way at this time. I'd love to talk about other things that could be of interest to you. Or have you heard about our advisory committee? Or, have you joined us yet on a Saturday to help whatever it is that your organization does in the community? So I think anytime you can continue with increased engagement, it's going to be for the benefit of you and the organization. That relationship with your donor will get stronger. Now that I'm with the San Diego Zoo, it's an easy thing for us to say, oh gosh, I don't know if you've seen this new exhibit yet. Can I take you around? Giving somebody an insider opportunity with your organization to meet some of the people, or maybe you've got a video you want to share, those types of things. Any of those cultivation tools, I think, are absolutely critical. And the more engaged a person is, the more likely they're going to say yes. And if their no behind the money was timing, maybe next, 6 months from now, you might be able to have that conversation again. So I think that's a great point and a nice way to help them see that you value more than their checkbook, right? That these are people who matter to your organization and that you want to have their engagement in whatever way is right for them.
Definitely. And, okay, so we've got a couple people that are chatting in what the signals they see virtually. So some people say for nonverbal signals, it's the nodding, the smiling, and then the eye contact, or whatever is
As
the
much as
equivalent of eye contact virtually. And then other people are saying, oh, just asking questions, if the donor is asking that questions and being engaged throughout the conversation.
Yeah, that's a great point. Again, not necessarily objections, but when they ask questions, it means they're interested. So you all indicated something that relates to this chef technique. So this is particularly true for in-person conversations, but it can be for Zoom as well. And so chef is about checking to see if the donor is touching their cheek or their chin, using their hands, what their eye contact is, as was mentioned, and their friendliness. So when people are doing this type of movement, you know they're more interested. If they're leaning forward and nodding, they're saying, yeah, I'm almost convinced. If you see these signals, then ask if you've answered all their questions. And if they say that you have, then you can ask for the gift. Prospective donors who are tightening their jaws, covering their mouths, leaning back like this with the extra chins, they're not receptive to what you have to say. So that's when it's a critical time to ask key questions and ensure that you can find the answers for them. Another piece is to have open and relaxed hands. Again, this can be hard to see on Zoom, but in person, if somebody is clenching their hands together or have fists and such, or they're fidgeting, you know that they're more skeptical or irritated. You have to stop talking and find out what's wrong. With the eye contact, same thing. You need to maintain consistent eye contact throughout and see that they are interested, that they're relaxed. And if they've got a raised eyebrow, if they're looking at you askance, then you need to find out what's wrong. So you might say something like, you seem a little uneasy. Would you mind sharing your concerns or your questions? Prospects who are smiling, engaged, and friendly are telling you that you've earned their trust. They might say, that sounds great, but I really can't decide today. And so then give them another reason why they might want to give, why today matters. You want to be listening for the word we. Oops, I'm sorry, I skipped the trial close, which is actually one of my favorites. So the trial close is when you're able to say things like, is this what you're looking for in a nonprofit? Is an initiative of this size a good fit for your philanthropic plans? Or what else would you need to know to make a decision? Or does this sound like something that you would like to help this organization realize? Although it's close to your formal attempt to close, the trial close is used to probe and reveal how far along the prospect is in their decision-making process. You don't need to ask a closing question if you know the prospect isn't ready to say yes. The time to ask for the gift is when the prospect is ready, but you can ask for an opinion at any time to help refine what you need to answer in order to help them to feel more comfortable. And then same thing as with your real ask. When you ask a closing question or attempt to trial close, don't say anything until the prospect gives an answer. The pressure of the silence is enormous. Silence is golden because it brings you the information you need in order to help the prospect to move forward in their relationship with you. Never miss the opportunity not to say something. And then lastly here, listen for we. If the donor starts to say we when they're talking about your organization or the project being discussed, that word speaks volumes. It tells you that a person is really bought in and that they've mentally joined the team. If you want donors to start saying things like, you want donors to start saying things like, we need to be doing this instead of you need to be doing this. If they make that switch, you know you've made huge progress. You're no longer an outsider. You're someone the donor believes in and wants to help. And so that signals that it's time to move towards your trial close or your closing question or to the ask itself. Now, again, we know not every ask ends in yes. So you're going to have to deal with rejection. This is a place where you're going to need to anticipate and rise above. So I'd love for folks to share their real life stories of when you faced rejection as a fundraiser. How did you cope and what did you learn? Every fundraiser hears no. Everybody here, I presume, but no hardly ever means never. It usually means not yet or not this way. So please share your story.
As people are typing those up, we did have someone share. Carissa, great to see your name and see you virtually again. I will share that right now. She said, I like for offering other opportunities of non-monetary engagement. She said, I like that. Offering other opportunities for engagement to continue cultivating the relationship. The delayed timing gives an opportunity to sell the value of the organization. And that's true. That gives you a lot more time to develop that relationship with the prospect or your donor, and you get to know them more. on a personal level. I think that's a great example, Carissa. Thank you. Let's see. Joanne shared gratitude in the face of rejection. That is great. I know that can be very hard to do when hearing a no, but that is great advice and a great outlook to have when you're facing these things. I know it can be hard and you can take it sometimes personally, but it is a part of life and I think that's okay. So yeah, if anybody else would like to share a little bit more about their stories or maybe advice that they have on how to deal with rejection, please feel free to chat.
I love that gratitude in the face of rejection thing too. The time the donor has spent with you is still really meaningful. And the way that you help connect them with the organization is super important. If you get a no, maybe you can ask, I so appreciate your consideration. Are there others you think might be interested in this? That's a way for them to provide maybe some leads and still feel good about the support that they're giving you, even if it's not in the financial way. So please continue to share your stories. But I'm going to go through these ways to deal with rejection. First and foremost, again, fundraising is a numbers game. We know that every no gets you closer to a yes. And so, as tempting as it can be to take a no personally, it hardly ever has anything to do with you. Refuse to allow anybody make you feel bad about yourself. And remember, Walt Disney was once fired by a newspaper editor because he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. So somebody saying no to you doesn't mean that you're not going to continue to do really well for your organization. You are a great advocate for your organization. After donors and prospects hear what you have to say, they'll want to get involved. And everyone deals with rejection, and it's just as much a part of fundraising as getting dressed in the morning. And fundraisers need to find ways to cope with that rejection, or they'll need to find another career path. So you want to make sure that you're anticipating rejection and rising above it. Expect it, but don't create it. You would never say, I can't imagine that you'd really want to be involved with this project. Nobody's going to say, yes, I really do, actually, when you say that. Again, you want to have that assumptive perspective and say that you know they do want to be involved, and is this the dollar figure that they're interested in? You also want to broaden your definition of success. Like we've been talking about, instead of only looking at the dollar figures outcome, you want to look as success of getting out there in the first place. You're having these meetings, you're engaging with this donor, you're maybe finding a new way for them to be part of your organization that they hadn't before. All those pieces are really important, whether or not they say yes to you at the moment of the ask. But because it's a numbers game, you also want to commit to attracting more donors than you need. A no is much easier to handle when you have a steady flow of qualified prospects streaming in. And remember, you're not alone. Think of how many hundreds of rejections great fundraisers have had in the face of their journey. Another piece is to forgive yourself. Maybe you did make a mistake, but so what? That's how we learn. I say to my 8-year-old all the time that you get a million mistakes every day, and after you've used all of them up, you get a million more. And it's the same thing with asks. The more practice you have, the better it'll go. But every now and again, you'll have some foible, and that's okay. You learn from it, or you laugh and say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that I said that way. What I meant was." You can always fix it. You also want to engage in positive self-talk. You're a great advocate. You want to think after they hear how they can be involved, they'll want to be part of this. Another piece I'm going to add on this, I don't know if you're familiar with power poses, but there are different, if you Google it, you can find a whole bunch of power poses that actually generate additional serotonin and other positive hormones in your brain and help you feel good. My favorite's the Wonder Woman. You stand like Wonder Woman does, and you stand for about 5 minutes, and it literally changes your own body's reaction to things and builds up the confidence that you need. I have definitely done my Wonder Woman pose before hard conversations and gotten those good juices flowing in my brain. Another piece is to make sure that you remember that you aren't going to give up. Remind yourself persistence is key to success, and rejection might not be pleasant, but you won't let it stop you. No, you are important because of who you are, not what you do. Never equate your worth as a human being with your success or failure as a fundraiser. So as we discussed, objections usually mean that it's a sign of interest. Your attitude is key to handling your objections. And the ask is the natural conclusion to the carefully prepared presentation to a qualified prospect. And then, of course, we want to use verbal and nonverbal cues to point to readiness. And depending on what study you look at, somewhere between 55 and 95% of our communication is nonverbal. So you definitely want to be paying attention to that. Any questions?
Yes, thank you so much, Laura, for that presentation. We're going to transition into the Q&A portion of this webinar, so please submit any questions or comments you have in the Q&A section of your Zoom control panel. We'll start off with a couple that we already had, but as you are typing those up, friendly reminder that the slide deck and the recording will be available and sent in the next following days for you to review at your leisure. For any more information on Fundraising Academy, all of our live webinars and a full list of on-demand videos are listed on our website. And don't miss our next webinar, the last of this year, on December 15th with Adriana O'Donnell on transforming your major gift strategy. So register today.
And I have to say, you should attend that one. Adriana's amazing.
We're very excited.
I'm really glad. I didn't know she was one of the presenters. That's wonderful.
We got her. All right, let's start with some of the questions that we had earlier on. Let's see here. So one question we had was very interesting is, what about board members who feel that their time is enough of an in-kind donation and they don't want to give cash?
Yeah, that's so tricky, right? For whatever it's worth, I've never talked to any fundraiser who said to me, oh yeah, our board's amazing and everybody fundraises great and they're all super excited to be part of the fundraising subcommittee. It's not a thing. As we've mentioned, some folks are uncomfortable with it, or as you said, feel that their expertise is all that they really need to give your organization. That shows that they weren't onboarded well. If your organization has give or get policies for your board or just fundraising expectations, those need to be clearly laid out when the board members recruited to be part of the board. This is also why things like board terms are really critical. I've been with organizations that the same people have been on the board for 40 years and none of them give, and there's sort of no way to get them to now if it's never been an expectation before. So I've also been with boards that get completely revamped and everyone understands what those expectations are. If a board member isn't going to give personally, hopefully they'd be willing to have a conversation about who they could connect you with, whether that's their own corporation or another organization in the community, other people that they could help open the door to. Even if there isn't a formal give or get, maybe they can help with the get. Or in some cases, I've had board members who the only give they would do was for our gala, but then they would fill their table with potential prospects. And so I think there's different ways to sort of look at that, and that, in a perfect world, board members are the first people to sign on to a campaign, and you say you have 100% board participation at some really high dollar figure, and maybe that happens somewhere, but it's not what I usually see. And so I think, in your scope of board members, some of them are going to be raring to go with connecting you with folks and writing their check on the first day and all of that. And others are going to be a little more reticent. But again, that's something that needs to be clear with the board development committee and with your exec, that whatever those board member expectations are. And of course, you're grateful for their expertise or they wouldn't be on the board in the first place. But financial support is also a critical component.
So now let's get into some of these other questions. So Robin asks, how do you know how much is reasonable to ask a person?
That is a great question. So it depends, right? It depends on the need of your organization. It depends on the assets and ability of that person. If you're fortunate enough to live in a community where there's a lot of people who are philanthropic, you might be able to take a look at the donor walls of other organizations that your prospect has been part of in the past. The key piece is usually they're giving to your organization is typically your best indicator. But that said, I mean, I've had $1,000 donors we've asked for $100,000 from because of me. We knew that they had the capacity. So it depends on the need of your organization and on that person's ranking, for lack of a better word. So you may have a research department who can do some work for you on this, or it's something that you need to figure out. And I will say, always round up. If you think they might be willing to do a $50,000 gift, you want to ask for 75 or 100, because they can come down. They can say, oh gosh, I wish I could, but really I'd only be able to make this much. But nobody ever, well, maybe not ever, but rarely are you going to ask for 50,000 and have them say, actually, I'd like to give 200,000. Would that be okay? That's just not the way it works. And one of the examples I like here too is, when you go into like Vaughn's and you go to their wine section, they've got like $300 bottles of wine on the top shelf. And I don't know who on earth buys a $300 bottle of wine at Vaughn's, but maybe they do. But because they have the $300 bottle there, more people are going to be likely to buy the 100 or buy the 60 or buy the 30. But if the $100 bottle was the most expensive bottle they had up there, more people would buy the $50 bottle or the $20 bottle or whatever it is. So you want to start high. And sometimes you can even, like, a donor might come to you with a dollar figure in mind and say, I am so excited to give my $5,000 gift. And you say, wow, that's wonderful. That's so generous. We're so excited. However, we were thinking about an overall plan. Like, I had an alumni member who was going to be our ambassador for his class. And he came to me with this $5,000 gift. And we were hoping he would make 10 for the same reason I just said, right? If he makes a $10,000 gift, more people are going to do 5,000 or 2,500 or whatever it is. And so I said, wow, that's amazing. However, I hope you might consider making a $10,000 gift, and here's why, and explained the same logic to him. And he basically laughed and said, you're good at your job, and said yes. And so it never hurts. And if they come with 5,000, they probably have the capacity to do more. That's another piece. If they immediately say, oh, sure, you know, you didn't ask for enough. I once took a prospect or a donor out to lunch, lovely person in our community, and we wanted her to do a $25,000 gift. And I asked her and she said, oh yeah, I'd be happy to. And I thought, shoot, we left a ton of money on the table because it was so easy for her to say yes. We were able to go to her later for some other things and it worked out. But if we'd asked for 50 and she'd had to think about it, you know, that might have been a better outcome for us.
Awesome. That is great. I never thought of it in that way, but that makes a lot of sense. The wine and bonds. I definitely think that way when I'm looking at some of the different options. Um, let's see. The next question is if you could discuss frequency of making asks to donors. How often is it appropriate to go back to the donor, and how frequently can you go back?
Right. So again, it depends, right? In general, I think most people expect an ask maybe once a year. Depending on your organizational history, maybe they are going to make an annual gift and support your gala or whatever it is. So you want to look at history to see what they're used to. But if you have a special campaign that's starting that you want to get them in on early, that's perfectly appropriate. For membership organizations like the zoo, our donors give their zoo membership and then we ask for additional gifts on top, maybe for a capital campaign or maybe for general support of conservation, and things like that. Year end is obviously the biggest time of giving of year. And so if you have somebody who usually gives in April and you're not asking at year end, it's probably a great time to see if they're interested. And then the other piece is to ask the donor, when you're working with corporations and foundations, usually they want you to come once a year with your menu of opportunities. And that approach works really well with donors as well, with individual donors. Because if you have that information out ahead of time, or even just know that you're going to want to get them to give to these 3 different things, and maybe you don't have the details of the last campaign scoped out yet, you can still go to them saying, we hope this year you'll make a gift of $50,000 that could go into these 3 different areas. And here's what that could look like. You might make a 1-pager that shows, this project, and then also your event or whatever it is. So I think it depends on each relationship, but donor history is usually the best way. And then you can also ask, After you've completed your relationship and your ask on one level, you can say, we might have some other needs. Well, and don't say we might. Say, we expect there's going to be a few other needs that arise this year. Would it be okay if we come back to you to discuss those? And they'll probably say yes. But again, you want to lay that out on the front end. You don't want to go to them saying, this is the one time we're going to ask all year, and then need to go back 3 times. When I worked with the Red Cross, there was a big challenge of there's a new disaster and you can't forecast those. And so being able to look at donors from, geography and their demography and what type of fund they wanted to support in the past helped us to segment. So we weren't always going to the same people every time there was a new disaster. And it's tricky, but again, when in doubt, ask the donor.
Thank you. Okay, next question we have is, what materials should you keep on hand when talking to donors, or what types of info is important to give to a potential donor, like formal proposal?
Great question. So again, it's going to depend on the level of donor and what the contribution's for. I know for us with the zoo, like we have our year-end campaign is all going to be around the same project, Tembo Trail. Tembo Swahili for elephant. There's your fun fact of the day. And so Tembo Trail is going to be the newest addition to Elephant Valley. And so we've created both direct mail pieces that are going to be asking for support of Tembo Trail. And we've created a beautiful brochure that goes into the details of what the project's going to accomplish on the local, regional, and global level. And so depending on the donor level, we're going to take these different packets and tools with us for that conversation. Depending on the donor and their history, maybe you have an annual report. If you don't have one, you want something like it. This year we had an event we were going to do, and then it turned out that our zoo director is going to go have his dream job and become the executive director of the St. Louis Zoo. And so featuring him for this December event is no longer an option. So we took the time and energy that we were going to put into the event, and we created a gorgeous stewardship brochure about the support of our donors over the past year and what an impact it's made for us. And we have a digital version of it and a print version so that we can share it with donors in different ways. Your own website should be a great tool for you as well. Hopefully updates can be made regularly, and that you can say, for the latest news, here's what's going on. Or you want some vanity URLs that make it easy for somebody to find, for instance, Tembo Trail, and it's not a URL that's 7,000 words long or characters long with a whole lot of @ signs and exclamation points. You want to make things as simple for folks as possible. So it's real important to have leave behinds, or I've definitely been with organizations where I made them. Work with your marketing department if you have one, but it depends on the size and scope of your organization. When I started at the Red Cross, we were 600 separate chapters and not one consolidated organization as it is today. And so I showed up and asked, where's our leave behinds? And people looked at me like I had 3 heads. And so I created one for our services to the armed forces using the general information I knew. I created one about our CPR training. I created one using the information about our local disaster relief, where we responded to a home fire every 24 hours. And so that we had materials we could share. And it's always good to go through those with a donor. If you just leave them a packet, who knows if they're actually ever going to open it. But if you can, in your meeting, say, hey, and I put together these items for you, and walk through it with them, it'll give you the chance to see where they light up and where they get real interested. Maybe they had a military background, and so you thought service to the armed forces would be the best fit, but actually they really love the work that you're doing for child CPR or whatever it is. So being able to have some general overviews is really critical. And then when you are going to put together a menu of opportunities, you can grab a paragraph from each of those and customize it to each of your donors. So you can create a one sheet with the information you already have, and please, 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 with pictures and quotes. Those are things that are going to help it come to life. With the technology we have now, maybe you can do a 30-second video with a client or When I worked for Girl Scouts, a girl who just got back from summer camp and what that experience was like for her. Those kind of touch points go a really long way. And there's some great inexpensive technology out there, and I can get the information for Christine, where you can send somebody a video and you can see how many times they watched it. And then you can see that they like brought over the whole team and played it 6 more times or whatever it is. And then you know you've got a really engaged prospect.
Definitely. All right. And then along those lines of materials and things, I know we usually focus a lot more on individuals and individual giving with our curriculum, but this person is asking, when you're approaching a corporation or a business for a contribution, what would you do differently, or how would you lay out your presentation differently?
That's a great point. I think that, again, it's going to depend on the organization, but typically your corporate and foundation proposals are going to be a little more complex than what you're providing to an individual, hopefully following their guidelines, right? So you want to look and see what the natural fit is between you and that organization. If they're interested in human services, in food security, and they support low to moderate income people, maybe you want to show how your organization is providing food security to low to moderate income people. The good news is that there's usually a site to go to where you can get information and do your research on the front end. A little harder with individuals. That's where all those questions come in. But same thing, right? You still want to know who your representative is. You want to have a conversation with a human. You want to call the foundation and at a minimum leave a message on their voicemail to talk about how you might be a great fit. So at a minimum, if they don't get back to you, when you send your LOI, they'll be like, oh, right, that such and such organization, I remember they reached out before. Those types of pieces make a difference, whether or not you actually can connect. And of course, if you can connect, all the best. My colleague was saying how there's a community foundation locally that we got money from a long time ago. They haven't given in years, but she just sends periodic updates about what's going on. And then out of the blue, she got a response to one of them. And now we have the opportunity to put forward a proposal. So you want to think about what kind of report, whether there's official stewardship reporting you need to do, or just, hey, we're launching this great program and I wanted you to be among the first to know. Great touch point opportunities. If you don't have a foot in the door with an organization yet, those are great things you can do to stand out. And then, of course, with any actual grant application, follow their guidelines. It seems self-explanatory, but every foundation representative I've ever talked to says, oh my gosh, you would never believe how many people don't follow the instructions. My other little side caveat on there is that if there's a character count, it includes spaces. Every character count ever includes spaces. So don't think that you have more room in their form than you do. It is quite a challenge to cut down, although it is easier to cut down than to build up. So there is also that.
Definitely. And we have a lot of time. So also I wanted to bring up this option for you all. If you have a longer question, feel free to raise your hand and I will allow you to unmute. So if you have another question that you aren't able to type out, please feel free to raise your hand and we can get to it. The next question we do have is, you did mention, Laura, your power stance, your power pose that you do before someone asks, but they're asking if you have any other tips or tricks that you do before you go into that ask meeting to kind of build up your confidence or calm down the nerves.
Yeah, I practice, right? I talk to myself in the mirror and I feel like a moron while I'm doing it, but it's really great to practice, and it's good to practice with your colleagues. Rarely is the person going to say exactly whatever this other person says back to you. But I mean, my spouse is a great example. I practice on him and he comes up with things I never would have thought of. And then I can think about, oh, if they do ask about that, how do I address that? If they bring up like some real negative about my organization, how do I counter? And what if it is something I'm not familiar with? Another great thing to do if there's other fundraisers at your organization is to practice with them or talk with them about what objections they get with regularity. What's everybody always asking? With the San Diego Zoo, the question everyone asks is, when are the pandas coming back? It's not a huge question to answer, but strangely, geopolitical nation relationships are fairly complex, and there's a lot more to the pandas coming back than just our wanting them to be here. So you want to think about, you always want to practice. You want to, you can do this. You've done this before. Every ask gets you closer to the next ask. These are things flip through your packet, practice on your packet, run through your details, have your bullet points ready, whatever it is. If you are meeting virtually, there's some benefits to that, because you can have like your notes page up next to your Zoom and have your facts and figures ready. It's great for interviewing that way. My resume is up and I'm able to rattle stuff off as if I have it memorized. It's fantastic. And it's the same thing with donors. So I think practice is really the biggest piece. And like for me, I know when I get excited, I get faster, and I try to be conscientious of that. And I try to remember to slow down and to speak more like this and a little less like this. Again, because we're experts at our areas, it's easy for us to want to just become word vomit and tell them all the great things about the organization. But when in doubt, go to questions. Tell me what made you start supporting our organization originally is one of my favorites, no matter whether it's a corporation, foundation, or an individual. With corporations, one question I really do like to ask is, what does a great partnership look like to you? And often they'll explain, oh yeah, we're working with so-and-so and these great things happened. And it can give you really good ideas about what your partnership could look like as well. Once I asked that question to Southwest Airlines when I was brand new with Girl Scouts, and the representative from Southwest said, actually, ours is my favorite, and here's why. And it was wonderful. Such a great way to build rapport as a new fundraiser for the organization, and to realize all the great things we were doing with Southwest that maybe we could replicate elsewhere. So that remembering to be curious, I think, is a big piece of it. And that you want to be confident, but not, arrogant. But that it's not about you. It's about the amazing things your organization does. And so it's really easy to be a positive advocate for this mission that you care so much about. You wouldn't be with the organization if it wasn't something that was interesting to you. And so I think remembering your why and what you're here for in the first place can be really helpful. And then take a couple deep breaths. The worst that's going to happen is they're going to say no. I once had a man drop an F-bomb on me when I was 8 months pregnant. I will probably never again have that experience. So it's going to be better than that. For the record, I was on the phone, so he didn't know I was 8 months pregnant, but my hormones did not help with that conversation.
Oh, my heart. Okay.
It was awful. It was so awful. So it's not going to be as bad as that.
We did have someone in the chat go, wait, where are the pandas? LOL.
For the record, our researchers, though, who worked with the pandas for the last 25 years are actually still working with the Chinese researchers so that we're able to help propagate the species. And we are the only organization outside of China who's doing radio telemetry with the pandas and tracking them in the wild. So we're still doing really cool stuff. They're just not on site.
Yes, that's where they are, Michael, in case you were still wondering.
They're in China.
Let's see. We have another question. How do you break the ice after a period of silence, or for the first time to get that conversation or to make the ask?
I think that's great. I mean, if you've made your ask and they haven't said anything, and it's been like 2 minutes and they still haven't said anything, you can say, so I have to ask, what are you thinking? They know that that's what you're thinking, but you can just say it. I think, if it's a new person and you haven't hardly met yet, you smile, you introduce yourself, and you ask about their experience. Asking a question of them is always the best way to go. Again, it's so easy to, I am Laura Rice and I'm the Senior Director of Sustaining Philanthropy and blah, 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 and my own eyes just rolled back in my head. But being able to ask them, wow, I saw you've been working with our organization for X long. That's wonderful. What do you enjoy? Why do you keep coming back? If they're a new donor, who else do you support? What brought you to this cause? Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's their passion for pandas, maybe it's whatever, but you'll get that inquisitive spirit going. And then, everybody loves to talk about themselves, right? So the more you can listen, the better a listener they think you are. And they'll tell everybody what a great conversationalist you are when you didn't have to say hardly anything. So I think always leaning into those questions. And and there's times when I've shown up for a meeting and somebody comes in late and says, well, I've only got 5 minutes. I'm like, you're working with somebody challenging. And so then you say, okay, well, since we only have 5 minutes, I was thinking that we should go over this and this. Does that match with what you're interested in? And let them get some buy-in, even when they're showing that they want to be a hard character and make this a challenge for you. You want to still get their agreement everywhere you can. Another tip, when I was working with Girl Scouts, we brought Girl Scout cookies. It opens doors. I get the feeling I'm going to get more people wanting to visit with me now that I'm at the zoo than I've probably ever had anywhere else. But where you can, bring a gift or ask if they'd be interested in coming to see whatever it is your organization does. Give them a little behind the scenes that makes them see why your relevance is so important. There's with your organization, it's going to be different than it is with mine, but be creative. Talk with your colleagues about what their experiences are, and whenever you can, bring a story.
All righty, I think those are all the questions that we've had so far. So thank you everyone for your participation in our Q&A and everything that you've shared. Again, you will be receiving a link to access the slide deck and the recording and a follow-up email in the next few days. I just want to thank you all for joining us, and thank you so much, Laura, for joining us today and sharing all of these great stories and words of wisdom. Before we close out, do you have any last words or last pieces of advice that you like to share?
Just, you can do it. You wouldn't be a fundraiser if this wasn't something that was in your heart and that you didn't want to help change the world. And that's it. Years and years and years ago, a supervisor of mine just had the biggest grin one day. And I was like, what? And he's like, we are so lucky. We get to help people change the world. And it's true. We are so lucky. I am probably never going to name the savannah at our safari park because they aren't going to just do it because I'm nice and kind and what have you. But I might get to work with the person who does, and I might get to give them that opportunity. I was telling Christine before, I was working with a donor peripherally. This was a team project, and I was maybe 5% of the slice. But last week, she spontaneously wired us $500,000. Oh my gosh, I had anything to do with that. And so it's just, keep up the great work. The world needs us now more than ever. So keep going. And when you need a break, take a break. Call your fundraising friends, complain about what needs complaining, and then sally forth so we can keep up the great work.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. And thank you again to our audience. Thank you so much for spending your time with us on this Wednesday. Just a few last words to help us continue to improve our monthly webinar series and ensure we are providing value to you. Please take a few minutes to complete our survey that will appear on your screen at the end of the webinar. We would greatly appreciate it. But we hope you all are safe and healthy. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for all that you do to better the communities in which we live, work, and play. Thank you all so much for joining.
Thanks for coming.